Hi, this is Garibay, and today we're going to talk specifically about why Dungeons and Dragons news cannot escape the orbit of Twitter. It's a really big deal. We just had a situation, and I want to point you guys to Nerd Immersion. If you want to know what's happening in Dungeons and Dragons news, you really need to be listening to Nerd Immersion. Nerd Immersion is very distinctly, very powerfully paying attention to what's happening in Dungeons & Dragons news and doing everything he can to report it like instantly, right? And I honestly, I'll tell you right now, I think when it comes, Nerd Immersion is the Wall Street Journal of, or maybe I would say Nerd Immersion is the New York Times of Dungeons & Dragons news, right? And he's covering everything that the D&D community actually cares about, and the D&D community at the macro level, not just woke D&D community, but the whole D&D community, right? So I just want to, I need to point to my sources. So, basically, to keep up with D&D news, I'm listening to Nerd Immersion, and there's nobody on the planet who's doing a better job right now of bringing D&D news to the surface quickly and accurately than Nerd Immersion, right? So, just want to give credit my sources here, and Nerd Immersion is crushing it, right? So last week we had the Week of Lore, and it was supposed to be a week where D&D actually gave us news about what was happening with Dungeons and Dragons, right? Well, what actually happened is they said a bunch of nonsense that nobody cared about, right? And at the end of the week, literally the Nerd Immersion guy was like, I don't know. He's like, meh, And then, get this, literally the CEO of Wizards of the Coast is like, oh crap, man, we blew it. Like we had a whole week of news, and we gave a bunch of news nobody cared about, right? So how do I fix this, right? So first of all, this is what I think he did, right? He immediately went on Twitter and actually gave real news and was like, hey, in 2022, you're going to get 2 classic books and you're going to get 2 brand new books for Dungeons and Dragons, right? And like everybody was like, way, hey, that's the news we actually wanted. It's not the news of which ones we're going to get, but at least we know what's coming. And, and the reality is, it's crazy that Wizards of the Coast is reporting content through Twitter and not through their main news source feeds, right? And I think the reason for this is the biggest news they have is coming through Twitter, right? Now, also, I just want to point out, last week, about 2 weeks ago, Twitter actually spoiled the main products for H2 2021, right? H2 is half 2, like the second half of 2021, right? And so Twitter, non-D&D Twitter, right? Just Twitter spouting news, right? Like just spitting up news, right? Twitter spoiled the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the Feywild Adventure book, and they spoiled the hugest news, which was Curriculums of Chaos, the Strixhaven D&D setting book, right? And guess what? Non-D&D official Twitter was right, and was early, right? So the news was coming out before Wizards of the Coast gave it, and it was dead on accurate, right? So here's the thing, basically, I don't like to talk about politics, but I'll tell you right now, Dungeons and Dragons is not above American politics. It's massively impacted by American politics. I'll tell you right now, you can say what you want about Donald Trump, but Donald Trump made Twitter a force to be reckoned with, right? Donald Trump proved the entire world that news pops on Twitter. This was debated for a long time. I've known this for decades. You know when I knew that Twitter was the new news source? It was when Twitter reported 4 hours before the actual news sites reported that Michael Jackson was dead, right? That's decades ago, right? That's almost 2 decades ago, I think, And I knew then, I was like, holy cows, man, Twitter had it right? And so the reality is D&D cannot escape putting news out on Twitter, because when you put news out on Twitter, 1, the media pays attention, 2, it goes to everyone immediately, and I think we're at a point where Twitter is really very much eating the media's lunch. It just, it's beating them to the punch on almost every single turn. The only thing the media has left is just doing in-depth coverage. They can't really do scoops anymore. Twitter always beats the major mainstream media sites on scoops. And so DND can't escape Twitter because the world can't escape Twitter now, right? Because of Donald Trump. So that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.